Before you can join, you have to hand something over. Not money, something that would end you if it got out. A video confession of the worst thing you have ever done. A photograph nobody is supposed to see. A signed statement about your mother or your sister or your closest friend. True or invented, it does not matter, because what matters is that it would destroy them. You hand it to a woman you trust. She is the reason you are here. And then, some months later, when it is your turn to bring somebody in, you sit across from a friend of your own, and you ask her for hers. That is the shape of the thing, and it is worth holding on to before we get to any names, because the names are what make people stop thinking about this case. The organization was called NXIVM. From 1998, it operated out of Albany, in upstate New York, and on the surface it was a personal development company. Expensive multi-day courses, a proprietary curriculum, a founder with a story about being one of the most intelligent men alive. Thousands of people took those courses. Many of them found them genuinely useful, which is a sentence this episode is going to need later. Inside it, from around 2015, there was a second organization that almost nobody in the first one knew about. It was called DOS. The women in it were told it was a secret sorority, a women's empowerment group run by women for women. It was not. Keith Raniere was at the top of it, and he was the only man in it. In 2019, a federal jury in Brooklyn convicted him on every count: racketeering, racketeering conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, forced labor conspiracy, sex trafficking conspiracy, and 2 counts of sex trafficking. He was sentenced to 120 years. So the crime is settled. That is not what this episode is about. Here is what it is about. Almost every telling of this story is the story of one man, a charismatic predator who fooled a lot of intelligent women. That version is popular because it is comfortable. It requires nothing of the person watching because the villain is a specialist, an outlier, and you are not going to meet him. Go and read the structure the court found, and that is not what is there. DOS was built in lines. Raniere at the top, a first line of women beneath him, and beneath each of those, her own recruits. To join, you gave collateral to the woman above you. To recruit, you took collateral from the woman below, which means that on any ordinary day, for almost every member, the person holding the material that could destroy her was not Keith Raniere. It was her friend, and her friend was being held by hers. All the way up, until you reach a man who is holding a great deal and has handed over nothing at all. Start with the object, because everything else follows from what it is. The Department of Justice described collateral as material intended to prevent members from leaving the group or disclosing its existence, damaging confessions about themselves and about people they loved, whether true or not. Sexually explicit photographs and video. In some cases, rights over property and money. Now, the obvious reading of that is blackmail, and the obvious reading is not wrong. But it misses the part that makes this case worth studying. So let me be precise about the difference. There is a reason the distinction is not pedantic. Watch what each one requires from the person it is done to. Blackmail is something done to you. Somebody obtains a thing you would rather keep hidden and threatens you with it, and the whole transaction runs on their initiative and your fear. Collateral is something you produce. You sit down. You think about what would hurt most. You write it, or you record it, or you photograph it. And then you hand it over, freely, in a room where nobody is threatening you, as the price of admission to something you want. Those are not the same act, and the difference matters enormously for what happens inside the person afterwards. First mechanism, and it is one of the oldest findings in social psychology: commitment through irreversible acts. When a person does something public, effortful, and difficult to undo, their beliefs move to accommodate what they did. Not because they are weak, because the alternative is to hold, permanently, the thought that you did a serious thing for no good reason, and that is a genuinely painful thing to hold. So the mind does the cheaper repair. It finds the reason. Elliot Aronson and Judson Mills demonstrated it in 1959 with an experiment that is almost comic in its simplicity. Women were told they could join a discussion group, but first they had to pass an initiation. For one group, the initiation was mild. For another, it was genuinely embarrassing. Then everybody listened to the same discussion, which had been deliberately made as dull as the researchers could make it. The women who had gone through the embarrassing initiation rated that dull discussion as significantly more interesting. Not because they were fooled, because they had paid more, and the mind does not tolerate having paid a lot for nothing. This is the fraternity hazing finding, and the door in the face finding, and Cialdini's whole chapter on commitment and consistency, which this channel covered in its 4th episode. The costlier the entry, the more the member values what they entered. Collateral is that principle sharpened to a point. It is not merely costly, it is unrecoverable. The photograph exists now. The confession exists now. There is no version of tomorrow in which you did not do it. And notice what that does to your account of yourself. If you say the group is dangerous, you also have to say you handed a dangerous group a weapon aimed at your own family. The cheaper story, the one that costs nothing to hold, is that the group is not dangerous, and the collateral was a serious commitment to a serious thing. The second story is more comfortable every single day you remain, and it is not a lie you tell anybody. It is a lie you do not have to tell. Because it is the only version that lets you get out of bed. Now the part that the documentaries mostly move past, and it is the whole architecture. You do not stay a member who is given collateral. Within months, you are expected to bring in your own. And here's the thing about that expectation, which is easy to miss. It is not framed as a duty. It is framed as growth. You are ready. You have something to give now. The organization does not ask you to become complicit. It offers you a promotion, and the promotion is complicity. So you go to a friend, somebody you actually like, somebody you actually believe will be helped by this. Because by now you believe it helps. You describe a secret group of women who are serious about becoming stronger. You do not mention Raniere because you were not told to, and on the first line and below many did not know, and you ask her for her collateral, and she gives it to you, and you hold it. Look at what has just happened to your position. Yesterday you were a person to whom something had been done. Today you are a person who has done it. The thing you own is not a bad feeling. It is her file. It sits with you, and it works only because she believes you might use it. Second mechanism. Call it the recruiter's bind. Once you have taken responsibility for someone else's exposure, the cost of leaving stops being about you. Walk out, and what happens to her? Who holds her file then? What does it look like when the woman above you asks why her line is collapsing, and underneath all of that, quieter and heavier? If this is a criminal enterprise, then what am I? Not a victim, a recruiter. Every one of those questions has to be answered before you can go, and none of them have good answers. And the group does not have to ask a single one of them out loud. The structure asks them for you at 3 in the morning, for free. This is why so few people leave organizations like this one. And it is almost never the reason people assume. The assumption is fear of the leader. The actual load is horizontal. It is what leaving would mean about and do to the specific people standing next to you. And you can test this against ordinary life, which is where it actually lives. The person who cannot quit the job is very rarely afraid of the chief executive. They are thinking about the 2 people on their team who would have to absorb the work. The mechanism is not exotic. It is the most decent instinct a person has, pointed backwards. And there is a third thing the line structure buys, which is the reason a man at the top can afford it. Third mechanism. Diffusion through a hierarchy. In a flat group, the leader has to apply the pressure himself to every member repeatedly. That does not scale, and every application leaves his fingerprints on it. In a line structure, he applies pressure to a handful of people at the top once, and the structure carries it down. The woman at the bottom experiences the demand as a request from a friend she admires, not as an instruction from a man she may never have met. Which means, on the day the whole thing is examined, that almost nobody can testify to a threat from him. Because almost nobody received one. That is not a flaw in the prosecution's case. It is the thing the racketeering statute exists for, and it is why this case was charged the way it was. You cannot get at a structure like this by proving individual threats, because there mostly were not any. You get at it by proving the enterprise. So watch how the demands move once the structure is loaded. And it is worth saying plainly what the first month looked like from inside, because the popular version skips it, and the skipping is what makes the whole thing incomprehensible. At the start, it is discipline, and it is presented as a practice rather than an obligation. Rise at a fixed hour. Answer your master within a minute of being contacted, at any hour, or explain why you did not. Restrict your food. Keep records. Report. None of that is a crime. Some of it looks like a monastery, and some of it looks like a rather punishing fitness program, and members described it at the time as a discipline they had chosen. Then it moves. Assignments become tasks for the group, tasks become work, and the requests become sexual. Fourth mechanism, escalation by increment, which this channel has now met 3 times in 3 different centuries. No step is a large jump from the step before it. Each request is small relative to the one you already agreed to, and it is delivered by somebody who has done it herself. And each time you comply, you become a person who has complied, which is precisely the thing that makes the next request smaller than it looks. And then, in 2017, the brand. Members were branded with a cauterizing pen in a design that incorporated Raniere's initials. They were told it was a symbol of the elements, or of their own commitment. They were not told whose initials it was. A physician who carried the same mark applied it. Think about that as an act of engineering, rather than as an atrocity, because that is what it is. A brand is collateral that cannot be surrendered, and it converts a private arrangement into an identity. A file in someone else's possession is a thing that happened to you. A mark on your body is a thing you are. Every other file in this system is a document, and a document can, in principle, be destroyed, returned, leaked, or made irrelevant by time. A mark in the skin cannot. It is on you in the shower, in a doctor's surgery, in every relationship you will ever have, permanently. And it says, I was in this, and here is my proof. And I made it myself. It is the same move as the first one, at the end of the ratchet instead of the beginning. The first act buys entry, the last one forecloses exit. Everything in between is the distance traveled between them, one small agreement at a time. What ended it was not an escape. It was a description. That distinction matters more than it sounds. People had left before. Leaving on its own changes nothing, because a person who leaves quietly is a person whose collateral is still held, and who has every reason to say nothing for the rest of her life. The structure survives departures. It does not survive testimony. Some members left and told other members what the group actually was, in enough detail, with enough corroboration, to a journalist and then to a prosecutor. Once the structure was on the record, the structure was the case. Because it is a racketeering statute, and a racketeering statute is precisely designed to prosecute an enterprise rather than an incident. The trial ran 6 weeks in the Eastern District of New York. First-line members testified. One of them, Lauren Salzman, described the recruitment, the collateral, and the branding from the witness stand, having pleaded guilty herself. The jury convicted Raniere on every count in June of 2019, and in October of 2020, he was sentenced to 120 years. Others were prosecuted separately. Allison Mack pleaded guilty to racketeering and racketeering conspiracy and served part of a 3-year sentence. Now, I want to be extremely careful here, because this is the point where this genre goes wrong. Some of the women who recruited and held other women's collateral have been prosecuted. That is a matter for a court, and a court has dealt with it. But an argument about how a machine works is not an argument about who deserves what, and I'm not making the second one. What the structure did was arrange things so that being a victim and being an instrument were the same position, occupied by the same person at the same time. That was not an accident of the design. It was the design. A person who is both cannot cleanly be either, and cannot cleanly leave, and that is the entire function. If you want a test of whether you have understood this case, it is that sentence. If your account of it requires the women to have been unusually foolish, you are describing a different story, and it is a story that has never once explained anything. The people in DOS included physicians, actors, executives, and the heirs to a very large fortune. Whatever the vulnerability was, it was not a shortage of intelligence, money, or options. It was that the first step looked like courage, and every step after it looked like consistency. And notice what the structure had to spend to get there. 120 years for the man at the top, criminal exposure for people who had themselves been recruited, and a set of files that could only ever be used once each, because the moment one is used, the whole arrangement becomes visible. It is an extraordinarily brittle machine. It only looks solid from inside it, which is the only place anybody was standing. There is one more thing in the record that I have deliberately held until now. The courses worked. Not the crimes, the courses. Thousands of people took NXIVM's programs, and a great many of them said, and still say, that the material helped them. Some of the most credible witnesses against the organization are people who will tell you both of those things in the same breath. That is not a footnote, and it is not an embarrassment. It is the mechanism. Nothing about a 5-day course on managing your own reactions tells you anything about what is in the room 3 floors up. And the fact that the first thing was real is the reason people believe there was nothing wrong with the second. A group that offers only harm recruits nobody. Every structure of this kind is built on top of something that genuinely delivers, because that is the only foundation that holds weight. And so, the 5th and last mechanism is the one you can actually use. When you are trying to work out whether an organization is dangerous, the quality of what it gives you tells you nothing. It is the wrong question, and it is the question everybody asks. The question that works is about exits. What would it cost you to leave, today, quietly, and never explain yourself? Not what would you lose. What would it cost? In what you have handed over, in what you have done to other people, in who would be left holding what you were holding. In an organization that is safe, that number is small, and nobody has ever arranged for it to be otherwise. In an organization that is not, that number has been carefully built, one voluntary act at a time, by you. Nobody was holding them. They have been arranged into a shape where they were holding each other, and every one of them had helped to build it. And that was the point.